weeds never end, do they? There's always a few weeds out in the garden, but if you can remember, just about 8 weeks ago, we planted our onions, and look at the size of them. They're really just starting to grow like crazy, and we're getting some really good growth out of the onions. They're doing really well, but we're not going to be planting onions today. In fact, in this section over here where we had our peas, we took the peas out. I've got that area tilled up, and it is pretty much ready to plant. So after the peas and spinach and lettuce are done, usually when the heat really starts to kick in the middle of the summer, that's when we can replant some beans or corn and get a nice fall crop coming on. If we plant beans right now, usually about Labor Day we'll be picking beans again, so plenty of time to get those beans to mature and to produce. And even around the first part of August we can replant some more cold crops, so we can put more lettuce and spinach and radishes and kale and a lot of those quicker cool crops. We can put those back in about the first part of August and then let those mature into September and October. We'll have some really nice crops for then. But what I've done to prepare the soil is went through and tilled up those peas, went through and raked a spot where we're going to plant, and then I put some GardenMax down. Now the GardenMax is a soil amendment, and it's a special kind of soil treatment. The GardenMax has a lot of organic matter in there. It's got some great fertilizers and a lot of soil conditioners to really build the soil up. And we've been using it in our garden, in our flower beds, and especially if you have a lot of clay soil, it's great for helping build that soil back up, allow water and nutrient to get down into the soil, freeze that nutrient up to the plants, and it really just conditions the soil so that the clay isn't so dominant, and it breaks it up so it'll start to work the way it's supposed to. So put a little bit of the GardenMax in there, and then we're just going to put some beans in. So I've raked this area. We're just going to make a little furrow. I'll make ends up being about an inch and a half deep furrow. We're just going to do a little small section just to show you how that works. And then I've picked one of my favorite varieties of beans, and it's called Jade. And Jade's just a nice long slender bush bean. It's going to mature in about 50-55 days, and they come along really quickly. That's what the seeds look like right there. So you can kind of see what those seeds look like. And really, to be successful with your bush beans, you want about one seed about every inch. And it depends on who's planting, but you know, if you're relatively careful, you can just drop those seeds right in there. And if we get a few extras, that's all right. I don't mind having a few extras in there. We can plant them a little bit thicker, but about one seed per inch is about perfect. Just going to drop those in. I've got a nice slow release fertilizer from Natural Guard we can put in there with the seeds right when you're planting, which is great because as the plants grow, it'll gradually break down and feed those plants. So I like to use Natural Guard's tomato and vegetable food. This is an all organic blend. It's got beneficial microbes, microorganisms. It's got a lot of good organic matter in there, just like the GardenMax, and slow release fertilizer. But what's unique about this is not only does it have mycorrhiza in there to help build the root system, but it has archaea, which is a different kind of organism that breaks that organic fertilizer down and pre-digests it. Makes it available to the plants much quicker than it normally would, because organic fertilizers are usually pretty slow to release their nutrients. So we can just put this right down the rows with the seeds. I like to use about a cup per 10 feet or so. So I'm just going to sprinkle this right down the row, right on top of the seeds. It's very difficult to burn the plants with this. You could put it on even 3 or 4 times heavier than what it recommends, and since it breaks down so gradually, you'd have a hard time burning those plants. So the organic tomato and vegetable food from Natural Guard does a great job at feeding those plants for the next 6 to 8 weeks, which is just about as much time as we need to get those beans to really produce. Then I'll take my rake and just slightly cover those up. So we don't want to cover them up too much, but we'll just cover them up a little bit. So they're going to end up being about an inch deep when we're done here. And that's pretty much all it takes. At that point, You can water them by hand if you'd like, but I love using a soaker hose. So I've got my soaker hose sitting here ready to go. I'll just take that soaker hose, lay it right down the middle of the row that I just planted. And when I use the soaker hose, I leave it on about 3 or 4 hours, and it will saturate that area right where I planted the seeds, and it will soak out about 6 inches, maybe even 8 inches on both sides, and it will really hydrate that soil, start to release that nutrient. And if we soak those beans well enough, they'll start to germinate, and we'll have those up in about a week to 10 days. They'll come up really quickly, so not too bad. But that's exactly how you get those beans planted, and super easy to do. We can plant a late crop of beans, corn, you can even do zucchinis, and then a whole bunch of cold crops after you take your peas and spinach and lettuce out. Once the heat really kicks in, they're worthless. They're done by the middle of summer, so we take those all out after they've produced. We can replant some new crops in there and really enjoy the soil and enjoy our garden late into the fall.